Oh, hello everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'm going to give it one more minute before I get started. But for those who do not know me, I'm Selena Rincon. I'm the Senior Enrollment Counselor for Programs in Latin America. It's nice to meet everyone. Can someone just give me a thumbs up that you can see my PowerPoint presentation? Perfect, thank you. Okay, so I guess we can get started now. I am going to talk about visas in Latin America and for all of the countries that we work in. So I'll go country by country, and then please feel free to put any questions in the chat, or I'll leave some time at the end as well. Okay, first, disclaimers that I like to share with all of our students for all of our programs is that although IFSA is here to support our students as best as we can, it's important for them to realize that we are not an official immigration resource. It's still important for them to always double check requirements with whatever government they are going to be visiting, especially for students who are not US citizens. My experience is mostly with US citizen students, but we do have knowledge on students from other countries if the country is very popular. Just to give you an example, we get a lot of students from Japan, so I have knowledge on that, but we've only gotten one student in the last couple of years from Pakistan. So that one we have less knowledge on. So it's always important for non-US citizens to reach out to me at the beginning of their application process so we can start looking into any requirements that they may have. Also, requirements are always subject to change. Requirements in Peru changed just last fall, very last minute. And so things can always change, but hopefully, things don't get difficult for our students. And that is what our on-site staff is there to do. They always keep an eye on any new immigration laws and how that can impact our students. So we'll get started with Argentina. Some of you may have attended my previous webinar where I spoke about the Argentina visa process in a lot of detail. So today I'm not going to go into as much detail, but I will put some information here. And then, of course, if you have any questions about it, please put it on the chat. I know that this one can be a bit confusing. So students who go to Argentina for a semester program require a student visa. This does not apply for any programs that are less than 90 days. So our new quarter program does not need a visa. Students who are not US citizens typically go through the same visa process as US citizens. So thankfully, this is not too complicated for them. The biggest difference is that based on the country they're from, they may have to go in person. To give you an example, the student from Pakistan applied at the New York consulate. US citizens can do that virtually. The Pakistani student had to go in person. That was mandatory. So that really is the biggest difference students could expect. What gets confusing about the Argentina visa process is that it depends on the consulate. So there are consulates that do everything virtually, and there are some that do not. So the very beginning of the process is for students to check which consulate they need to use. That is typically based on their permanent address, but some consulates are flexible and allow your college address to count as that permanent address. So they do get a newsletter from me at the very beginning telling them about the consulates and which ones they should be using. At the end of the day, it is the student's responsibility to confirm they have the correct consulate because we create paperwork based on that. Then I do a mandatory visa webinar for all of our students in order for them to receive their visa paperwork, and I keep track of it. So if they do not attend, they do not get the visa paperwork. This semester was the first one that we implemented this rule, and it worked very well. All of them attended, so they all got their visa paperwork, which is great. And following that visa webinar, where I kind of go over the general process, if a student is using one of the consulates that allows them to do it virtually, we also have a mandatory one-on-one appointment. So those three consulates at the moment are LA, Atlanta, and New York City. Hopefully more consulates start doing this process, but so far it's just those three. What we do is they make an appointment with me for about 30 minutes. We sit down together and do the application. It is the easiest one that they can get because we actually do almost all of it. The only thing that students have to do without me is make a second payment directly to the consulate. Um, so the biggest differences is that because DC, Chicago, Miami, and Houston do not allow the virtual process, students have to actually mail or drop off their application, which means they have to turn in their passport, which can have implications for students if they're planning to do international travel during their winter or summer breaks. So students who tell me early on that they are traveling during the break, we can figure out a plan B. That could be either applying earlier for their visa or applying later, but paying expedited once they're back from their trip. It just really depends. This is more of a case-by-case basis. Um, very, very, very last option is doing it in Argentina. We strongly discourage this one because the government does not like it. This has to be like, there is no other option available. I don't even bring it up to the students unless I think it's the only choice they have. Of course, because this is just for advisors, it's worth mentioning that there is always a backup plan, but the backup plan is not the ideal plan. For those who are doing the virtual process, so Atlanta, LA, and New York, their visas is just a PDF. So they do not have to hand over their passport. They can travel to wherever they want over winter break. It does not affect their visa application. Students do get a little weirded out by that just because many of our students have never even applied for a visa before, but then when they do apply, they're thinking it's going to be, more like in the movies or television, things like that. They are not prepared for an email with a one-page PDF that they have to print out. So I make sure to make that clear to students. The process can take between 2 to 4 weeks, although during a winter break, it is closer to 4 weeks, not 2. Because winter break is shorter, um, students typically apply late November, and consulates are really busy because of the holidays, so it takes them a while. Whereas in the summer, they're pretty much available all summer and they can be pretty quick about it. Students have gotten their visas in a week. So it just really varies. That's why it's really important for students to follow my steps when I tell them when and how to apply. So for AUP in particular, I tell them to apply as soon as their paperwork is ready. Because even though the program starts later than our English study in Buenos Aires program, again, because of the holidays, it can delay the process. One thing to keep in mind though is that the process cannot be started more than 90 days before the program starts. Any questions about Argentina? Also, I have the PDF from my previous presentation about Argentina, so I'll make sure to share that as well via email in case anyone is curious about more details. So for Chile, it's a little bit easier. Students enter as a tourist, which gives them 90 days in the country automatically. They do not have to apply. They don't have to do anything besides show up, go through immigration, and get that 30-day visa. It's gonna look like this piece of paper right here. So students have to keep this paper. They should take a picture the moment they get it, because if they lose it, it makes their process more difficult. But it is what says that they have 90 days in the country. Then on site, they will pay $120 to extend it an additional 90 days. Our on-site staff helps them with that process. Non-US citizens may need a student visa. So off the top of my head, I can tell you that students from the Dominican Republic, Venezuela, most Central and South American countries will need some kind of visa. And so they should be reaching out to me from the very beginning, even if they are permanent US residents. So what happens is students arrive, again, they go through immigration, they get this piece of paper a month before those 90 days. So 60 days into the program, the IFSA staff sends them the website where they go in, input information from this piece of paper and pay the $120, and then they get granted the extension. It is very straightforward. Um, there, there could be students who say, oh, well, why don't I just get a student visa? The student visa is much more complicated. So really, this is the best and easiest option for students. The other option is for them to leave and re-enter the country. We try to not advertise this option very much because it really is the responsibility of the student. They have to make sure they buy a plane ticket that or a bus ticket, that they, plan the dates correctly, that they don't miss class, work around their homework or things like that. And if the student feels like they are very responsible, they're financially capable, and it won't be a problem for them to leave and re-enter the country, then they can absolutely do it. But if it's too much for them to plan out, maybe they're really busy with classes and they don't want to have to exit the country, the extension is very easy and straightforward. Now, if they happen to need a visa, there are two situations. One is if they are in the Santiago program and they are doing a government internship. In the last 3 years, I have not had a single student who's actually needed it. The only government internship that has been popular recently is through the agriculture department, and they actually don't require it. So it would be very rare that a student doing an internship in Santiago would need a visa. And that is why I do not share the visa steps with students unless they speak to me about it. We've had students in the past who, because I gave them the information just so that they are knowledgeable about it, started the process, paid for it, and then realized they didn't actually need a visa because they didn't end up getting a government internship. We don't want our students to waste money unless they absolutely need to. So what we do now is I give them information from the first 2 slides, basically, and I say, if you end up getting a government internship or if you are not a US citizen, reach out to me. We're going to meet and we're going to go over your application process. This is especially important for non-US citizens who may need a visa because the visa requirements can change depending on what country they are from. So it could be that the Chilean consulate requires additional documents for someone who's from the Dominican Republic versus someone who is from Canada or something like that. And so for student visas, the initial application is done online, but again, the consulate could require any additional documents that they want. Typically, that will be more about like financial stability, so they probably will ask for like bank statements. They'll probably ask for a document from the student's US university that proves that they're a student there. They will also require an FBI background check, which is again why we don't want students doing this unless they absolutely have to. An FBI background check is an additional fee, and it needs to be apostilled, which is an additional fee and additional step. It is a lot of work for a student who has never done this before. So we really, really try to make it so that they don't have to. We also provide a letter from the host university in Chile. We provide this anyways, so this is always available for our students in the student portal once they have committed to the program. When we input them into the student system for the local universities, they give us a letter that says that they will be a student there. And that is always helpful for them to have when they're traveling, but it's required if they're getting a student visa. Now, Costa Rica is incredibly easy. They do not need a visa of any kind. They just show up into the country and get an automatic 180 days if they are a US citizen, if they are Canadian, Japanese, and many other European countries as well. So in the last couple of years, they changed the rules. Previously, if you've worked with students who've gone to Costa Rica in the past, they had to get an extension similar to Chile because they would do 90 days and then extend an additional 90 days. But it actually required multiple steps. That is no longer the case. They can just show up, go to immigration, and they get 180 days automatically. If they are not a US citizen, they should double check with me. But like I said, most of the students that we typically work with that go to Costa Rica do qualify for 180 days. So this would be a situation where if we got a really difficult visa process, we would need to reach out to the consulate for Costa Rica, wherever that student is based, which is why it's really important that they reach out early. And to give you an example, we have for our January program in Costa Rica, we have a couple of students from Australia who are studying in the Australian universities and have a visa for Australia, but are citizens of China. They need to apply for a visa if they're going to Costa Rica. We haven't had that happen yet for a semester, so we don't know what the student visa process is like for a Chinese citizen who's going to Costa Rica for a semester, but we do know what it's like for them to get a tourist visa for a month, and that can take about 3 weeks. So far it hasn't taken too much time, and it doesn't require any documents that we are unable to provide. But it's always best to start the process early so we don't run into any problems with them getting their visa on time. Peru is a really difficult to explain situation for students, especially for those who have never applied for a visa before, because multiple things happen. They cannot enter with an actual student visa. So in the way that Argentina lets students apply for a short-term study abroad visa, that doesn't exist in Peru. So they can't do that before they arrive. And the process that they do conduct is technically not a visa. It is called a change of immigration status. So in Spanish, it's called Solicitud de Calidad Migratoria a Formación Temporal. It just means soliciting a change of immigration status for temporary status. So again, that can be very confusing for our students. That is why they get a visa newsletter right after the application deadline, where I tell them what they actually need to do. So I try to not overwhelm them by giving them all the legal jargon. I tell them things that matter. So the first thing is when they buy their flight, it needs to be within 90 days of arrival. So after I have sent all the visa information, I send them the flight booking newsletter. On there, I tell them that it needs to be a return flight that they can change, because when they enter Peru, they're going to enter as a tourist. And to enter as a tourist, they need proof that they are leaving the country within 90 days of arrival. So that's really important for students to understand. The other thing that they need to understand is that they are really not doing anything for this change of status prior to arrival. All they need is their passport, their parents' information, their if they're married or not, which most of our students are not, things like that. Then I share that information with the lawyers in Peru, and that is it. Students don't have to do anything else before they arrive in Peru. Once they arrive, the lawyers that we hire will start the process and will do most of it for them. So during on-site orientation, they actually go to orientation and talk to the students about what the process is going to look like more in detail. The process typically takes around 2 to 4 weeks. And it is after that process is completed that they will change their flight. So that is when they can change it to the actual program end date. Part of the process will require them to go in person for biometrics. And Interpol fees will be paid, and an appointment will be made with Interpol, where they also will have to go in person. The lawyers do all of this for them. So the lawyers make the payment, set up the appointments, and the lawyers will email us saying, okay, these are the appointment dates and times for each of the students. So now the student's only responsibility is to show up to those appointments. And the lawyers will also be there in case anything comes up. The fees for this process are $710. This fee is charged directly on the IFSA student account, so the students do not have to pay anything once they're already on site, unless they have a really difficult immigration situation, which so far we have not seen that happen, and we don't really foresee that happening. A potential situation like that would be maybe a student who is like a dual citizen of multiple countries and needs to have like biometrics and background checks and things like that for other countries that are not the US. We haven't had that happen, but it could. Um, Now, the reason why we do it through the lawyers is because the process requires a local bank, but our students cannot have a bank without legal permanent residency of Peru. So it's kind of this never-ending loop that um, unfortunately students who have tried to do it on their own in the past end up not getting it. So we don't tell the students like all of this history to not confuse them, but as advisors, I think it's important for you to know a year ago when a student before these new laws came into effect, a student thought that they could enter the country, exit, re-enter, and the 90 days would restart. But when they tried to do that, immigration officials sent that student back to the United States. Luckily, it was at the end of the semester and they were able to do their final exams from a distance. But if this had happened halfway through the semester, they would not have been able to return. And so Peru has made it clear that tourists cannot overstay 90 days within half the year. So like they cannot add to it. Um, and so that is why our students have to go through this process where they actually request an extension for an additional 90 days. Now, for Peru and for Chile, it's really important. Well, for all of our countries that say 180 days, they mean 180 days. So students cannot plan independent travel before and after their program if it's going to pass those 180 days because they will get in trouble with immigration, especially with Peru. They are very strict about it. When that happened to our student last year, we tried to help them out and there was just nothing we could do for him. He had to go back to the States. Now, for Mexico, it's also very easy, just like Costa Rica. Students enter with a tourist visa for 180 days. It is automatic, they don't have to do anything. We do strongly encourage students to fly directly into Merida. We don't make it mandatory because we recognize that some finances are really important, or for some students, flying through Mexico City or Cancun is cheaper. Um, we have not had issues with students who have done that in the past, though we can never guarantee that there will not be issues. So the immigration in Merida like knows our program, sees our students' acceptance letters from the local universities, and know to give them 180 days on their tourist visa. In Mexico City and Cancun doesn't know that. So it will be up to the immigration officials' decision how many days they put on there. And if they were to give a student less than 180 days, maybe they give them 90 days, the student would have to exit and re-enter the country throughout their semester. So strongly recommend booking directly to Merida. And absolutely never ever going through land. So students who live, for example, in Texas, I live in Texas, it's very easy for me to drive down to Mexico. When they cross by land, they are not getting this 180 days as a tourist. They might just get a week. We had a student who tried it and only got a week and had a week to figure out how to exit the country and then come back. So definitely students cannot do that. Um, Especially because there is no standard student visa process. So similar to Peru, there is no study abroad visa for students that students could apply to. So if students are US citizens, they should be flying into the country so that they can get the maximum amount of tourist days possible. Many students who are not US citizens are from, for example, Canada and other European countries will most likely also get those 180 days, but they should always double check with me anyways. Students who are from Central America and South America may have other restrictions. So again, it's really important for all of our programs to reach out to me at the beginning of their application process, just so we can double check, make sure everything is good to go. Now, throughout this process, I'm there available for office hours. We rarely get in touch with consulates directly. Most of these consulates care a lot about student communication. So they will not share information with me. They will speak to student directly. But if something comes up, perhaps the student is missing a specific document that we can provide, they might reach out to us and say, oh, we need this legal document from the government of Argentina. And so we send it to them. Students who, for example, are having trouble communicating with the consulate, what I tell them to do is keep reaching out. This is another reason why, for all of our situations, we like to start early, because we've had students who email and email and email, and consulates are not responding. But there is really not much we can do besides send them an email and let them know. So this has been happening a lot with Argentinian consulates, where a student will email them once every week for the past 3 weeks and nothing. And they'll call as well and nothing. And it's happening because they're very busy. The New York consulate and the LA consulate already told me directly that they're very busy. So while we can try and help out, consulates are not going to care what I have to say for the most part. So it's really important for students to always communicate with consulates. IFSA also creates any necessary paperwork. So one document I haven't mentioned that we can also create is a document that shows that talks about finances. So we'll say like IFSA covers meals and housing and things like that, and we put the program date and the program name, the student's name, their university information. So if a consulate is requiring kind of like maybe the bank statements are not enough, maybe a student has parents who don't feel comfortable with the amount of money they have in their bank statements and worry that the consulates will not consider that sufficient, we have that document that we can provide as well. This has happened a couple of times for students who submit bank statements for the Argentinian consulate in Chicago. They get a little nervous about that, so we always make sure they know they have that document available as well. We also complete proof of health insurance. So there's a document in their student portal called CISI, and it's proof of health insurance in case any of the consulates ever request it. It's not very common. I very rarely see them ask for it, but it's there in case they need it. We sometimes cannot make certain documents, but it happens very rarely. The only times we've had that issue is when consulates have asked for like an official like business relationship between IFSA and a specific university. And so if we don't have that, we can't give that to them. But it's only happened to me like twice in all countries. So we sometimes have very, very specific situations that happen, and that is what IFSA is there for. We try to figure it out alongside the student. And if we have to reach out to, colleagues at NAFSA or places like that that have more experience with a specific country or a specific visa situation, we will do that. Luckily for Latin America, it generally is not that difficult. It can be a little bit overwhelming for students, again, because they probably have never done this before, but the process itself is not too complicated. I am also available to meet with parents. So I do info sessions in the evenings for parents in English and in Spanish, about a month before programs start. So if they are helping their students with the visa process and they're confused, like we can meet and we can talk about it. But that is, for the most part, the visas in Latin America. Any questions? Okay, well, if there are no questions, I will I will let Josh have this recording so he can send it out to everybody, and I'll ask him to also attach the presentation from just the Argentina visas. Thank you everybody for being here today, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Bye, have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.